Happy Advent, Pam. Thank you again so very much for warmly welcoming me into your Get Your Life lifestyle blog and vlog. I'm very happy to be part of your platform today to address grief and self-care, which self-care is something that you strongly advocate on your platform, and it is the most important method of taking care of ourselves when we are grieving, whether it have to do with a health scare or a career setback or the loss of a loved one or any other traumatic event or situation in which our life transitions. We want to make sure that we are mindful and we take care of ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually. As a matter of fact, in my first ANAK KO book, Our Babies Have Halos and Wings, I wrote a chapter about self-care focusing on mental, emotional, and spiritual health in addition to physical health, and I elaborated more in my third ANAK KO book, Positive Perspective. I also started co-presenting grief workshops earlier this year with my ANAK KO parliamentarian, Dr. Jaime Rodriguez, in which we presented examples of physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional health exercises that include meditation, and we can start out with guided meditation as well as low impact workouts, expanding our creativity, channeling those energies that we're feeling in order to produce something really beautiful out of that traumatic situation. And mostly I refer to those in terms of loss and bereavement and mourning a loved one who either passed away or maybe there was a falling out in a relationship, because those count as grief as well. So the main thing is to really be gentle with ourselves during this time. So we have G for gentleness and G for grief. We just want to make sure that we are clear about what we need and that we take healthy steps towards our healing instead of resorting to addictive vices like alcohol, excessive alcohol, or addictive drugs, or promiscuity, or excessive shopping, anything of that nature that may be destructive instead of constructive towards our recovery with grief. When we're healing from grief, or at least trying to get on the path towards recovery, it really does help to have a belief system in place. So we have an element of H for hope and H for heaven. If we believe that we are going to reunite with our loved ones someday, it gives us the goal of being a good person in general. Now, my first and second ANAK KO books each have 50 plus Bible verses, because scripture may help us when we are speechless or we don't have the words to express ourselves, or have a sense of direction of where we're going in order to establish a life that is normal without the loved one who we were used to having in our lives. It also really helps to make creative tributes to our loved ones. In my case, when I lost my baby Angel, I would write letters in a journal to her. Of course, I knew that she wasn't going to physically read the journal, but it was a creative outlet for me, and it actually became part of an appendix in this book. And other hobbies that you already have can come into play, or even new ones that you didn't even know that you could be passionate about before. But it really helps to make sure that you continue establishing your sense of self during this time. It may be different because you don't have that person or that animal who you so cherished with you physically, but in a spiritual perspective, we want to think that we're making that tribute to them by continuing on with our lives through the different forms of healing that we would have. Some of these hobbies can include visual or fine arts, like artwork. For example, the summer after my first miscarriage, I was still mourning for Angel, and Doc Rod, who I mentioned earlier, who co-presents grief workshops with me, he found a mindfulness journal at Barnes & Noble when we went there to do some research one day. And during that summer, I engaged in a lot of activities like drawing, coloring, adult coloring, and other artwork that I've done to help memorialize my Angel. I also had lost my first adulthood cat, Asia, at the age of 14, and during that summer that I was grieving for her, that's when I started writing this book. And while I was actually writing my first book, I lost my second baby, Divine. So I wrote poetry for all three of my heavenly babies and have published them in my ANAK KO books. So writing can be a form. Listening to music. My husband David and I joined our church choir to sing for Angel when we were newlyweds, and I also love to dance, and just something that lifts your spirits so you won't feel so sad all the time, because of course sadness is a natural response to grief, but we don't want to stay stuck in a rut forever. We want to make sure that we are living our best lives, at least at the extent of not having that cherished loved one with us. After losing my oldest cat, my OG original gata, Asia Felina Catalina, and here is her sister Annie behind me, I was extremely devastated. She was part of my family for a while. She was the only one who I lived with up until rescuing Annie, and Asia, aka OG original gata, Felina Catalina, was with me since my master's degree, and Annie since I was going for my Doctor of Philosophy degree. So they've been with me through milestones up through my marriage to David, and then we blended our cat family. And yes, we are that cool cat couple, but Asia was a big part of my life throughout my adulthood. So that was extremely tough, and to be quite frank, I just didn't imagine life without her. I wasn't prepared at the time to let her go. Since then, I've gotten certified in grief counseling, in addition to a pet loss grief support specialty. So during my training, I learned that reminiscing about the happy memories that we have with our animal companions can help cheer us up and lift our spirits, as opposed to the other extreme with ruminating about the circumstances surrounding the loss. Because if we dwell on the sad memories, of course, we're going to be set back from recovering from our grief. So we want to make sure that we remember our animals fondly, whether we had them in our homes as our pets, or we worked in the animal service or animal science industries like veterinary medicine or a kennel or a shelter, because losing animals who we work with can be devastating in itself. Now, we ended up burying Asia in our Queen of Angels Marian Garden, which we initially started in memory of Angel. And a few months later, we also buried our second baby, Divine, there. And we started growing marigolds out there because marigolds represent Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead in Spanish, or All Souls Day on November 2nd. And a symbol is the sugar skull, and there is also the marigold, which the aroma of those flowers are said to entice the spirit. So if we have the flowers at a mantle or an altar with pictures of our loved ones who are deceased, in certain beliefs in Latin America or in Catholicism, we would like to believe that the marigolds draw those spirits closer to us during that time of year. When my husband planted marigolds the summer of Asia's death, we started seeing them spruce up in October, which was after we buried Divine. So by the time All Souls Day rolled around, they were flourishing in a little field in our garden. But in 2021, that frost in Texas wiped them all out. But we have the marigold that has special meaning to us, and we'll cover that a little bit more later. But I do want to convey that pet loss and pregnancy loss and other stigma connected losses may induce what's called disenfranchised grief, which is grief that may be frowned upon by society and discounted or not considered as a legitimate form of grief. So sometimes for those of us who have lost babies or have lost animal companions, we may not be taken seriously enough by the general public because, they may not think that the fetus counted or that an animal mattered as much as a human. But if we've established that bond, then they do indeed matter. But when we lose a pet or an animal companion, then reminiscing about their happy memories with us is what's important, in addition to what they've learned from us. Now, the day that my cat Asia died, we just found out that she had tested negative for cancer, but she was still sick. So the morning of her death, I rushed her to the vet when she was seizing, and my bishop, Michael Pfeiffer, OMI, sent me this image of Saint Francis of Assisi to seek his intercession as the patron saint of God's creatures, including all the animals in the earth and God's creation, planet Earth. So that was very helpful and reassuring. We actually buried an image of Saint Francis of Assisi with Asia. And my husband was really instrumental at that time because I was unprepared for Asia's death, and I just felt helpless at the time that she went to heaven and crossed Rainbow Bridge. So luckily he took over the burial process, and it really helped a lot. It really helps to have a connection with somebody who is supportive and have somebody there to turn to and trust in that time of need. But he was also grieving. He cried during the losses of both of our unborn children as well as Asia, and that outpour of compassion really touched me the most. Any pregnancy or infant loss does matter, whether it's an abortion, a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or an early neonatal death. Those babies still matter, and parents will deal with them how they see fit, how they prefer. Some may internalize and want to keep the information private, and that's to their prerogative, and some may be more openly expressive. I actually dealt with both of my miscarriages differently. Now, when I lost Angel, I was part of the 25%, or the 1 in 4. And I was very open about my pregnancy in the first place. So when I was teaching face-to-face classes at the university, I had already let my students and my colleagues know, just in case I had to take off to go to the bathroom at a moment's notice. And when I did take off for medical and bereavement leave for my miscarriage and to bury Angel, I kept my students in the loop because I wanted to have them finish the semester strong. When I returned to work from my first pregnancy loss of Angel, my student Lauren Gonzalez, who actually is my foundation's first Marigold Scholar, gave me a giant greeting card poster of her condolences and had the rest of her class sign it. So it was a very, very sweet gesture. I had another student, aka the Queen Bee, Braylon. She gave me Philippians 4:13, one of my favorite pieces of scripture, in the form of a mug rug, which I actually have over here. And basically it says, I can do all things in Christ who gives me strength. So it was reassuring to know that I had students on my side. And since I had hundreds of students all semester, I was quite candid with them when I returned to the classroom. And some of them approached me, whether it be by email or in person, to either confide in me about their own experiences and their families, whether they had other relatives or close friends or people they were in relationships with whom they lost a child, or reminding me of our faith. I had one of my business students actually tell me that this may not be the plan that I want, but God has something bigger planned for me. And I didn't even imagine how big, but now, we've established this foundation named after Angel. And I think that's the biggest reward we can have, is to establish a legacy for our child, even though she is no longer living. When I lost Divine, it was during the pandemic. I was at home. I didn't see a lot of people for work, so I did keep her loss to myself for the first month until pregnancy and infant loss month rolled around, and that's when I became more public, because our foundation had started our 5K in memory of the babies who were gone too soon. So we kept the miscarriage to ourselves more. But another difference between my 2 miscarriages, which for those of us mothers who have suffered multiple pregnancy losses, the last statistics that I found actually placed us in just 2% out of the overall general population. So that's a pretty tough pill to swallow, but not a club that any of us want to be part of. Yet we are here for each other, and that's what my foundation is all about. But when I lost Divine, I wanted to lead a healthier lifestyle like I did before I got married and before I got pregnant. And when I lost Angel, I actually hit my peak weight and ended up losing 25 pounds the following year and a half. But then I gained weight again when I lost Asia and Divine. And this year alone, I lost 50 pounds. So that is a success story and part of my tribute to my heavenly babies. Now, even though parents may treat their miscarriages differently and cope differently from others, bottom line is we want to make sure that we are gentle with ourselves. When I lost Divine, I hadn't worked out regularly in a while, and I was trying to get along that point when I lost Angel, but it was just too traumatic at the time. I suffered from postpartum depression without raising a live child, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and for the first time in my life, I actually resorted to comfort eating instead of burning the calories that I consumed. But when I went on YouTube to look up pregnancy loss workouts, I only found at the time about a handful of yoga videos. So yoga helped, and walking also was just as meaningful. It's moving. That's what matters. And of course, since I love to jam out, dancing to music always lifts the spirits, not just elevating the heart rate, but also just the elevating the mood as well. We don't want to just stay in bed and no longer have the will to get up, because we still have a purpose of living, and we can take the approach of at least doing this for our loved one who we lost, living for them since they're no longer able to live. And of course, those of us who have lost a child, whether it be in the womb or after they were born, if they've lived for, a matter of months or years or decades, no matter how long they've lived, it's always the most devastating experience for a parent to outlive their own child and have to bury their own flesh and blood, because we had that connection. Children who lose parents, that's also devastating, as well as spouses, because at one point we were part of each other's flesh. So when our babies die, or our parents die, or our spouses die, then part of us dies. So if we outlive them, then a tribute to them would be to live, because we want to honor them as well. When I wrote to my baby Angel during my pregnancy and in the several months that followed after my miscarriage, I had a vision of establishing a nonprofit organization that would help other bereaved parents. And at the time, I was looking for a lawyer to retain to get the ball rolling, in addition to establishing a memorial scholarship for Angel through my PhD alma mater, Our Lady of the Lake University. And lo and behold, while I was taking those steps towards making those legacies for Angel, Asia died. And during that summer after my first adulthood pet loss, I wrote this book, Our Babies Have Halos and Wings, started ANAK KO, and also started the scholarship. As a matter of fact, the day that I started miscarrying Divine during Labor Day weekend, I actually received the first Angel Dispo-Rendón Memorial Scholarship winner's thank you letter. So it was interesting timing in that course of events. Actually, the same day I received the thank you letter for the scholarship, I also received our first donation to ANAK KO, which was from my godmother. Actually, David's and my marriage godmother, Emiliana Popatko. She's actually our most frequent ANAK KO donor so far, with my godfather, Victor Popatko. So we really appreciate them. And ANAK KO so far has had 2 virtual annual 5Ks. We have our PALE 5K in October, which stands for Pet Plus Pregnancy and Infant Loss. And since the patron and protector of expectant mothers and unborn babies is Saint Gerard, his feast day is on October 15th, which is also the same day as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. So around that time of year, we have the virtual 5K. And before ANAK KO was established, there already had been an international wave of light to light candles and memories of babies gone too soon at 7 p.m. every respective time zone all across the world. So our biggest fundraising drives of the year are our 5Ks. The other one is the EJ 5K, which is named after my nephew, Elijah James, who was shot and killed at the age of 15. His mother, Bernadette Aniag, actually is our founding president of ANAK KO, and she was the one who drew to my attention Worldwide Candle Lighting Day, which takes place on the second Sunday of December, which is actually coming right up as we film this. And just like with International Wave of Light, the candles are lit at 7 p.m. And this time it's in memory of all children who've died, children of all ages, including babies, but even including all the way up to adulthood. And as a matter of fact, one of the causes for ANAK KO is to help keep our babies' memories alive, whether they be our infants, our children, or our animals. And so far we have donated thousands of dollars to families who have lost children even at adult ages. So far we've even had adults who have died from the coronavirus, cancer, or other health related causes, but we're also here to help those who have lost children from other causes like homicide or suicide or an accident. And we don't discriminate on any losses, and we are here for those who have also been part of an abortion process as well, because that can be traumatizing in itself. Despite any circumstances surrounding that choice, we are here for the bereaved parents who may regret their decisions or may still miss their baby even if they chose to terminate. Aside from our 5K fundraising drives, we do accept donations year round. We have a PayPal and we have Venmo, Zelle, online donations through Facebook and Instagram, and Amazon Smile, and we'll go over all of those platforms towards the end. So we welcome those donations to help other bereaved families when they lose their children or their animals. And those expenses can go towards tombstones because they can be very expensive. When I buried my first child, I actually spent in the 4 figures for a plot at Babyland in the cemetery, and luckily the funeral home, Rudy Garza Funeral Home in Harlingen, was generous enough to give the coffin for free, her casket. And we also donated to our church and had the mass for her. And rest Father Larry Klein's soul. He was our priest who celebrated our sacrament of marriage and our funeral for Angel, and he died a year and a half after we buried Angel. But even bearing a baby can cost thousands of dollars, and people may not be prepared financially or emotionally when a death occurs. So ANAK KO is here to render that support. I do want to mention acronyms for ANAK KO. I mentioned earlier that it is named after my first unborn baby, Angel Nevaeh, which is heaven spelled backwards. So A for Angel, N for Nevaeh, A again for always, K for Kailanman, which is forever in Filipino, and another K for kisses, and O for onward, because we have that eternal love for our babies who are no longer with us. And ANAK KO together is a phrase for my child in Filipino, which is my native language. We also have another acronym, CARE, for CARE, which stands for Community Advocates Render Empathy. And after ANAK KO was established at our first board meeting, which happened to be the day after we buried Divine on Grandparents' Day, our board also decided to start offering care packages for families who have lost loved ones. So they can include tangible items such as our rainbow wristband, which rainbows represent rainbow babies who may come after the death of another baby, and rainbow bridge for pets who cross over to the other side. But our care packages also include grief counseling services, which I offer now that I'm certified in grief counseling, and pet loss support. Now, we also offer our Marigold Scholarship, which I mentioned earlier, for the Dia de los Muertos flower. And our first ANAK KO Marigold Scholar is Lauren Gonzalez, and she is currently a junior psychology major on the president's list at the University of Texas at San Antonio. So she's on to do a lot of great things, and the way that the scholarship helped her so far is that she rekindled her passion for dance, which is something that her grandmother, who died shortly before the pandemic, actually instilled in her. So she is honoring somebody who she lost and loved. The scholarship that I offer at OLLU has included a law student who graduated in 2021 and had lost a good friend in the El Paso Walmart shooting in 2019. And this actually, the second scholar is a marriage family therapist major who wants to help others with mental health. And our most recent Angel and Divine Scholar is pursuing her Master's of Business Administration right now, but she actually has come a long way from going into her associate's degree and her bachelor's degree working in the healthcare field. And now she's going on to work on the business side in the hospital setting. So incredible aspirations from the scholars so far, who are honoring those who they've lost, with our most recent one losing many patients working the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic. ANAK KO wants to continue growing, and hopefully we can do that with the help of donations and just spreading the word about our services for those who may need that extra help during their bereavement. ANAK KO offers memorial markers, expenses, care packages, and Marigold scholarships. But I do want to elaborate, because since our first intention of offering expenses for memorial markers, followed by the care packages and the Marigold scholarships, we've since added the grief counseling support services to those care packages. And of course, I have these 3 books here, including the Grief Communication Guide. This is actually a cookbook co-written by my husband, Chef Dave, and myself. He's actually an award-winning chef at both of the gastropubs where he works. and Positive Perspective is a self-care book, which actually is a tribute to Annie, who was behind me a minute ago. And we were actually released it on her 13th birthday in 2022 on September 20th. And I want to convey that having an emotional support animal is beneficial during any part of your life, whether it be happy or sad, any season. And we don't have to necessarily need a service animal or have a certificate, but having an animal who is our constant companion and our source of comfort really helps. And Annie and I were there to, and are still here for each other, comforting each other through the loss of Asia, and just being there for each other through our own health journeys together. But I do want to emphasize the importance of having an animal. If you're able to have a fur or fin or feather or scale, fine friend who you can take into your family, having one can be very beneficial. As a matter of fact, studies show that even petting an animal for at least 10 minutes a day can help prolong our own lives. So walking is also beneficial. If you have a cat or a dog who you can go outside with, that can also reap rewards for your own well-being. And these books actually all have ways that you can help heal with the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health exercises that we mentioned earlier. Now, this particular cookbook includes memorial recipes for certain times of the year, different holidays, or whenever you want to make tribute to your own babies. And culinary arts is another way of helping heal, being in the kitchen and coming up with new recipes and experimenting and trying them and having others try the food, or preparing food that was important to somebody who you loved who died. You can honor that person or that animal that way. I'm not saying necessarily eat animal food that you want to use to memorialize a pet, but maybe make them for your other pets if they're able to eat them as well. But the point is that ANAK KO offers these different ways of memorializing those who we've loved and lost. Now, the grief counseling services that I offer are virtual, so you don't have to be located where I am down here in deep South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. You can just email me at drdr@anakko.org, which is drdr@anakko.org, and set up a time and day that's convenient for you to have a confidential virtual session. And I would recommend a series of 10, if at all possible, to help you get on the path towards recovering in your grief. Now, we also offer grief workshops. So far, we've presented at the national, regional, and state level at conferences, but I can offer even smaller group workshops that can be virtual if we're not located in the same vicinity. But either way, I want to make it convenient for those who can access our services of support. Speaking of grief counseling, I am trained to work with children who have lost a loved one, whether it be a family member, parent or grandparent, sibling, or even a pet. And one misconception when a child is experiencing a loss is to use euphemisms or sugarcoat the situation, and that does not do any favors for a child. So I, as an expert, would not recommend using the words sleeping or taking a nap when it comes to death, because a child may then get confused and assume that this person who may be asleep in the open casket or may not be able to see anymore is going to wake up, or a pet is going to come back. So for adults who are trying to support a child, whether it be a parent, a caretaker, a teacher, anybody who's working with the child on a daily basis or lives with the child, should be clear about the finality of death. And we want to consider the different stages of child development for them to be able to grasp death. We might not be able to necessarily go into too much heavy detail about the circumstances surrounding the death, but at the same time, we want to make clear to the child that that person or that animal is not going to come back in that physical form that they were used to having while that person or that animal still was alive. Furthermore, it may even help to get the child involved in the memorial services for a loved one, if they are old enough and have developed enough intellectually to perhaps write a poem or a eulogy, a speech at a funeral. Perhaps he or she could do that, or an artistic tribute, like making a photo frame of the person or the animal who died, or painting rocks to put around the grave site, something that can be a creative outlet, so that way they can somehow start the healing process through that loss. And continuing talking about death can help the child develop that concept that it is real, it is final, and we're going to continue living our lives in a different normal from how we did before that person or that animal died. But we can still honor that person's or that animal's memory. Let me go ahead and break down our annual ANAK KO events now that we've been established since 2020. Our board of directors, which include myself as the chair, my husband, Chef Dave, as the vice chair, in addition to our parliamentarian, our secretary, our treasurer, and our chaplain, we have 4 meetings a year. So the quarterly meetings are held every 3 months, which are actually the third, every third month, March, June, September, and December, with one actually coming up to wrap up this year of 2022. So we usually meet the second Monday of the month, depending on whether a holiday is coming up, or the first Monday of the month if there is a holiday. And we discuss the progress of ANAK KO in terms of fundraising and other program initiatives that have included what we went over so far with the memorial expenses, care packages, and Marigold scholarships. And we have our scholarships due on June 30th every year, because we have the months that lead up to Bereaved Parents Month in July. And it's a special time of the year, in particular for my family, because I had due dates for both of my babies in May, and Asia's adoption anniversary, my cat for my first pet loss, was actually in May, and her death anniversary is actually in May. And in May, The second Sunday is Mother's Day, and the Sunday before that, the first Sunday of May, is Bereaved Mother's Day for those who have lost a child. In June, of course, we have the third Sunday, which is Father's Day, and the second Sunday before Father's Day is Bereaved Father's Day. And then in July, we have Bereaved Parents Month and also Bereaved Parents Day during the first week of July. So we have a lot of days and months during the intersection of spring and summer that raise that awareness and the need of support for bereaved parents. And in October, we have Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. So we have our virtual virtual PALE 5K, followed by the virtual EJ 5K in December. And during that time, those candle lightings at 7 p.m. also come into play for babies who are gone too soon on October 15th, and for children of all ages whose memories we celebrate are on the second Sunday of December. Now, in terms of the actual races that ANAK KO has, we're pretty flexible on the dates. In October, yes, the actual Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day falls on October 15th. But for those who wish to participate and donate, it can be any time in October that is convenient for you. And just hashtag ANAK KO ORG or ANAK KO Org, and our handle is at ANAK KO Org, to show that you've donated and that you've participated in any way that you want to run a 5K or to walk it, to bike it, or anything that you care to share, pictures, videos. We would also do balloon releases at that date and time. So it's really up to you how you want to support those who have lost babies through ANAK KO. And the same goes for the EJ 5K, especially since it's during the holidays. It may help to knock out the 5K within the first couple of weeks of December, since there are many Jews and Christians out there who celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas, or there's also Kwanzaa and other festivities throughout the end of the year. And we want to have more events as the time goes on to progress through ANAK KO, but the main ones are the EJ 5K in December and the PALE 5K in October for bereaved parents who've lost babies, pets, or children who are older. I also want to point out that at the end of August 28th, is Rainbow Bridge Day, which celebrates the memories of animal companions who have gone too soon. And we want to remember our pets and those animals who we may have worked with or served during that time. But of course, for those of us who have lost animals or babies, we remember them every day, but those are extra special celebrations that we can have for them. Many of us celebrate the anniversaries of their death, but also their birthdays, or those who weren't born, their due dates. So if you know somebody who has lost an animal or a child, it may be very helpful around those times of year, Bereaved Parents Month in July, or Bereaved Mothers or Father's Day in May and June respectively, or their anniversary dates, or October for baby loss remembrance, or December for child remembrance. I know that's a mouthful, but if you mark those times of year in your calendar, which my second book actually has a calendar to fill out, you can send a text message or a greeting card to a bereaved parent and let them know that you're thinking of them. It may reassure them if you mention that you are there to listen to them if you are willing to hear their story. Because believe it or not, many bereaved parents out there, even if they keep the information to themselves, they may feel compelled to disclose more about the baby or the child or the animal who they've lost with anybody who asks them. Now, of course, we don't want people to pressure us to talk about them beyond our own will, but many of us out there are willing to share that story, myself included. Now that ANAK KO continues to grow, I really am seeking to apply for and get awarded with grants, because we appreciate our donors, especially our repeated donors. We actually have a three-peat club for those who've donated every single year that we've been around, which we're going on year 3 right now. But grants may be able to cover way more than we are able to dispense right now. That can include continued training, such as for my grief counseling, which I do want to put out there that I'm designing a curriculum right now that is culturally sensitive to diverse populations. So I want the grief counseling to focus on marginalized populations, including those of world religions, people of color, the LGBTQ plus community, and individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And grants can also help fund more workshops, because currently as a nonprofit, we do offer these services pro bono, but donations always help towards being able to offer even more of those support services, the care packages, and the memorial expenses, in addition to the Marigold Scholarship. Other ways to raise those funds can also come from just getting those investors who may feel like ANAK KO is a good fit to support our cause, maybe those who can afford to help us, who may have experienced a similar situation of losing a child or losing a cherished animal companion. We appeal to you as well. Another way I would like to use any more funding towards ANAK KO would be to hire an intern who aspires to become a nonprofit or a marketing professional, so that way they can get their feet wet. And ideally, I would like to offer it as a paid internship if at all possible. But if there are any college students or fresh college grads who are going in that career path and want the experience and are willing to do it for free, of course, we welcome you as well, and we would give you a high recommendation if you help ANAK KO make that progress towards being a top 501c3 public charity. In the future, our board members and I have talked about other events, including a chalupa or La Loteria game, which is a bingo card type game that many of us down here in Texas or in Mexico may be fond of playing. There are also poker games, which my husband's restaurant, El Santuario Tacos and Cocktails in Olmito, actually offers poker games legally on certain evenings out of the week. So hopefully we can go through them for poker tournaments, in addition to golf tournaments, because his restaurant is actually located near a golf course in Rancho Viejo, Texas. But those are being considered right now, and hopefully we can enter an actual strategic planning phase so we can execute those in the near future. Now, further along, my vision would also include a charity gala to include people throughout our community and other markets to have a dance, a dinner dance, or a nice evening event to raise funds. And if at all possible, if we're not able to meet physically in the same venue, maybe even make it virtual. And having a silent auction may also be helpful if we have donors of items or services that can be auctioned out, because there are a lot of valuable products that can be donated by vendors or other services like ourselves that can donate really much needed and much demand products and services out there. So God willing, ANAK KO will move forward with those plans, and we're always open to other ideas that can raise funds in order to continue serving and supporting bereaved families, one family at a time. Lastly, for those of you who can benefit from our ANAK KO services of grief counseling and support, memorial marker expenses, our care packages, our grief workshops, our Marigold Scholarship, you can reach us through scanning the QR code right here, which would take you to our website, ANAKKO.org, which is spelled ANAKKO.org. Again, my email address is drdr@ANAK KO Org, and our social media platforms include @ANAK KO Org social media handle on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and YouTube. So hopefully that helps. And if you care to share funding with ANAK KO, we accept our donations on paypal.me/ANAK KO Org, in addition to Zelle and Venmo through my email address, which is drdr@ANAK KO Org. Or you can hit the donate button on Facebook, and my Instagram also is running a fundraiser currently. So there is a fundraiser link on the Instagram page. So there are different ways to donate. We also have Amazon Smile with our tax ID, which is 86-2020-221 as the charity. So through Amazon Smile, your eligible purchases can be matched with Amazon Smile of 0.5% towards ANAK KO at no additional cost to you. So you can just buy anything, and if it's eligible for an Amazon Smile donation, it can go towards your charity of choice, which we would hope that you select ANAK KO. So hopefully you'll enjoy your holiday shopping and donate at the same time towards our cause, or donate through PayPal, Zelle, Venmo, Facebook, or Instagram. And donations are always welcome all year round. And our main drives, again, are in October for Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and December for Worldwide Candle Lighting Day in memory of children. Thank you all, and God bless you all during this holiday season. And happy 2023.